Hey folks, welcome to the first episode of Shiny Beast of Thought. If you got ears, you gotta listen. Just Shiny Beast for short. That is from a Captain Beefheart song, actually from the album Shiny Beast. It's from the song Dirty Blue Gene, Gene. And that's what we're gonna call our music track of bonus content for this Patreon. So thanks for subscribing. I hope you enjoy this. The first episode, actually the first 3 episodes we're going to do are on Nick Cave and his lyrics mainly. And as with the other types of content that I'm doing, let me know stuff you'd like me to cover that maybe you've heard me talk about or see in the background. If you notice like a 7-inch of Beach Boys there or something, etc. And we'll see. I will if I can. And if it's, I have to talk about something I have some clue about or have some passion about. But, I could potentially try new things and be like, I'm glad you mentioned this. I can say something about this. Anyway, we're going to be looking at Nick Cave's lyrics. Here's my modest little Nick Cave library. In addition to the lyrics, we have the biography that only went up to 1995, so there's still so much more of this story to tell. Can't wait till somebody else does some more, but this was super informative and a great read at the time when I read it in like the 2000s. Have his couple of novels here, his first one, and The Ass Saw the Angel. Let's see, came out in 1989, and then his Death of Bunny Monroe. I lost the cover for that somewhere along the way. Published in 2009. And here's my embarrassing confession. I never finished this. I think I've read a lot more difficult type of literature since I first tried this in like the early 2000s. And I think that I could plow through it now, although I still think the way he wrote it is going to be a challenge. So I look forward to that. Maybe that's something I can read and cover. But what I did read was The Death of Bunny Monroe when it came out. And that was an easy read. That was just such a page turner and so crisp. And he'd just grown so much as a writer and could write really economical, novelistic prose. And it's an interesting story about how do you say it? Do you say that this guy is sex crazed? Is that really the right way to put it? Anyway, it's interesting and has certain kinds of gothic elements and ambiguously supernatural elements and so on. And I think at the time we all thought, oh, yes, finally, Nick Cave's going to just start writing fiction, But no, I think that's just a thing that he does every once in a while. I don't know if there'll even be one more. I also randomly have this Nick Cave graphic novel, which I have hardly even looked at. Just haven't got around to it. I think I wanted it randomly at some point as a novelty. I don't know how interested I'll really be in its content, but Nick Cave wrote a little blurb for it. Could be good. See if we'll get around to it. And then a friend recently gave me Nick Cave's recent book, Faith, Hope, and Carnage, which I've been putting off reading because as I opened it, I realized, this is a series of interviews. Each chapter, I think, is an interview. And I was just like, I love looking up an interview to find something out or, reading but a whole book of them, I don't think I'm too interested in. I used to have a huge file of Nick Cave interviews when I was researching him in the 2000s. And most of it was from the 90s and a little bit in the 2000s and stuff. And, at a time I was really into that. But, I haven't been too excited about reading this until I've now been looking at Nick Cave's lyrics all over again across the entire body of his work for like a week now. And it's given me that hunger again, like, I want to go hear what Nick Cave's saying about all this stuff. And sure enough, as I read, a portion of the first chapter, it's just full of gold. There's so many cool things in there that he says. He's initially talking about the making of Ghostine, and you're just like, wow. So I'm actually really looking forward to reading this now. Anyway, all this is really going to be about is kind of a whirlwind tour through Nick Cave's lyrics through the years from 1981 to today, and mostly kind of pulling out excerpts and stuff and going, isn't this cool, right? However, as I've done that, I've realized I think I sense certain arcs of his growth as a lyricist and so on that can be traced, and that I think will be interesting to talk about. And it struck me that, I was like, I got this, obviously some time ago, and there's so many more lyrics since 2007. And, at this point, I'm just kind of I'm just going to have to wait till he dies to get, the complete lyrics, because he's just going to keep writing them for who knows how many decades still. But that said, partly just for convenience and just for fun, because this is where this ends, but partly because I can actually see this, I think this actually does mark a certain career point. I think this is kind of the first half of his career, or almost, up to, I'm going to say, Abattoir Blues, Lyre of Orpheus, that double album, I think, is the actual transition album from all that went before to what's come after, from about Dig Lazarus Dig onward, and Grinderman and stuff. So we'll look at his career as those two halves. However, we're going to make 3 videos on this because I want to experiment with having some shorter videos. So we're just going to do one on the birthday party, and then that first half of Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, and then from Dig Lazarus Dig to the present. And very roughly, I think the arc that I see is that the first half has a sort of center of gravity on narrative, on telling stories, these often faux Southern Gothic stories and so on. And it takes a while to build up to that from a more fragmentary approach. And then it starts to come loose again and go back to the fragmentary while still telling a story here or there. And I think that kind of comes to its fulmination and culmination in Abattoir Blues, Lyre of Orpheus. And then it just goes into full associative, lateral thinking, fragmentary mode from Dig Lazarus Dig, Grinderman, but especially by Push the Sky Away. And then interestingly kind of starts to get some cohesion again in Ghostine, like through the fragmentary, which is a fascinating thing to see. So, and I think that Cave never really leaves things behind. He just brings everything forward with him in new modes, new iterations and fulgurations. So let's crack into the birthday party. First album, 1981, Prayers on Fire. Nick Cave's life is so interesting. We all know that. It's one of those artists' lives that is like, wow, just look at the intertwining of art and life for him. And he has such a strong vision that just came out of the gate and has never faltered, though it has mutated and transmogrified so much. It is just on track with what he burst out with, or at least by the time of the birthday party, what he burst out with. So that phrase, Prayers on Fire, to me, that is the title of Nick Cave's body of work. And I think probably will be by the time he finishes that body of work. His lyrics are prayers on fire. So it's wild to me that he starts out that way. So let's bang into some of these, starting with Zoo Music Girl. I've always been really drawn to the kind of faster, slightly heavier birthday party songs, though there's some slower grooved ones that really work for me as well. But oftentimes, both the music and the lyrics are just this pummeling of grime and grit in all this, like, all these shards of imagery that just cut you. And so many little statements that just kind of say it all as to the gutter that his like aesthetic was in. So like the first line is just, our life together is a hollow tooth. Like, and it's all, spit out the shells, rattle those sticks. And of course the constant erotic imagery, especially framed around youthful women, the sound of her young legs in stockings, and just all this breaking down. Just let it twist, let it break, let it buckle, let it bend. I want the noise of my zoo music girl. My body is a monster driven insane. My heart is a fish toasted by flames. I kiss the hem of her skirt. We spend our lives in a box full of dirt. That is kind of the tone consistently for the birthday party, especially. Just dirt and sex and this kind of beauty and monstrosity. And early on, there's these like songs, self-referential songs of self-loathing that are great. Just so much young angst. The song Nick the Stripper. Nick the Stripper, hideous to the eye. He's a fat little insect. Fat little insect. And just the way he delivers these lines, always growling out these lines. Fat little insect, you know, and all that kind of stuff. Dances on all fours. He's in his birthday suit. Here we go again. Insect, insect, insect. You know, the next song is Figure of Fun. Again, that self-loathing. King Ink. And this is, you know, he has this way of self-aggrandizing while self-loathing at the same time. And, you know, if it's narcissism, he's poeticizing narcissism and working through it. It's not navel gazing. His gaze is always pushing outward, even if it is through dirt and insects and grime and guts. That is a way of getting out of pure interiority into exteriority, I think, or at least in Nick Cave it is. Even though a ton of that mud is in the heart, for sure. But it's in the world, too. So King Ink strolls into town, he sniffs around. King Ink kicks off his stink boot, sand and soot and dust and dirt, and he's much bigger than you think, King Ink. This was written before Cormac McCarthy's writing in Blood Meridian about these cowboys with the horrible smell wafting up out of their boots all the time. A bug crawls up the wall. King Ink feels like a bug, and he hates his rotten shell. Cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha. King Ink, get up, go forth. And a big rallying cry from this time that people latched on to: express thyself, say something loudly. And, you know, that's his modus operandi at this point. And he's able to just be like, I'm just going to vomit this stuff out. And there's so many, like, chunks of beauty within that grossness. King Ink feels like a bug swimming in a soup bowl. Oh yeah, what a wonderful life. Fats Domino on the radio. So he's just sketching out his world, his artistic realm. You go on to the album Junkyard in 1982 with the awesome cover art by Ed Roth, which I get some nostalgia for because I got the only magazine subscription I ever had as a kid in the 80s. I got this magazine called Cartoons that had these covers that looked like this with all these like cartoon muscle cars. Not quite as grotesque as this, but you know, it was on the safe side of underground comics, but it was gesturing toward that. And Nick Cave sought Ed Roth out for this cover. You know, just song titles like Big Jesus Trash Can, just kind of say it all. And of course, here's where it begins. Never has there been a lyrical landscape as Christ-haunted as Nick Cave's, I would wager. And the great thing about the Christ imagery is it just shows up anywhere and everywhere in everything. You know, Big Jesus Trash Can. And in these early ones, he tries to make references to like Texas and things like that that don't feel very meaty and meaningful. He's just throwing stuff out there. Later, when he gets into his faux Gothic, faux Southern Gothic, it's still pretty ethereal, but it feels more connected to things he cares about, maybe from his Australian background as well as his love of the history of rock and roll with Elvis and different things. But you know, a song like Kiss Me Black, I mean, it just sounds like average boy goth stuff, but the way he writes this stuff is just different. He's talking about the succubus, the incubus, come on, kiss me black, I need to feel your lips around me. But then he's like, and, you know, I should have said from the very beginning, and will say on the title, but content warning on various levels, from graphic language to, you know, abusive language and so on. But, you know, violence to women is a big thing in Nick Cave. I don't know what's going on there, at least in the first portion of his career. And I guess back in the day, there was some chat about that, and feminists and so on being like, what's this Nick Cave guy about? That seems to have died down, and maybe that's because he's grown as a person and that's not such a feature anymore. But it's there, it's part of it, and it adds to the grime and the discomfort of a lot of these lyrics. I mean, a lot of his lyrics are just straight up transgressive lyrics, so you got to be prepared for that. But this line, she's like a dog, you have to kick her, sleeps like a swastika, and says, everyone's a winner now because everyone's a sinner now. Come on, kiss me black. You know, just like, that's unusual. That's not your typical goth boy lyrics. And he says this line here, back in 1982, Come and sail your ships around me. Come on and kiss me black. That's going to come back in a very iconic song, the ship song. Run your rusty cutlass through me. Come on and kiss me black. And undo me. More disturbing still, 6-inch gold blade, which begins with the graphic line, I stuck a 6-inch gold blade in the head of a girl. She's lying through her teeth. Him on his back. Hands off this one. Hands off, she cried, grinning at me from hip to hip. Hands off, pretty baby, tough bone, then so soft to slip. And later on the lovely line, oh baby, those skinny girls, they're so quick to murder. Ouch! So, and like, oh, come on, shake it, baby. You know, like, man, yuck. And going right on from that imagery to Cupid doll. Well, I love that Cupid doll. Yeah, I bought her in a show. I dressed her up in a cheap red cotton dress, but everything was either fished out or spat out, fished out or spat out. Well, I love that Cupid doll. And part of me is like, is this Lester Ballard? Had he read Cormac McCarthy's Suttree at this point, which came out in the 70s sometime? But it's interesting. I will say I've been reading Suttree by Cormac McCarthy, one of his first half of his career Tennessee novels, Southern Gothic sort of novels before he went into sort of a Western Gothic from Blood Meridian onward. And I had always felt definitely some kinship between McCarthy generally and Nick Cave generally. But looking again at these Southern novels, and particularly Suttree, and reading this, at the same time I'm like, whoa, this is so McCarthy and this early stuff, this Southern Gothic stuff from Nick Cave. As I'd always thought it was very Flannery O'Connor, and it is, but it's got that dirtier aspect that McCarthy has. But anyway, relating to beautiful young women in ways that are super problematic and either super graphic and on point or like vague but creepy. Junkyard, about being hooked on junk, being a junk face, and just amazing song titles like Sometimes Pleasure Heads Must Burn. There's just so much guttural delivery in so much of this and just repetition of words, and it's as much about that vocal soundscape as it is about the words themselves. And this goes on through early Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds as well. And then the Bad Seed in 1983, the song Sunny's Burning, which begins with a essentially unrelated line that is also iconic from this point in their career with the hands up, who wants to die, which people really latched onto. Have you heard how Sunny's burning like some bright erotic star? He lights up the proceedings and raises the temperature. Flame on, flame on. Now I've seen to Sunny's burning. Someday I think I'll cut him down, but it can get so cold in here. And he gives off such an evil heat. Flame on, hail my incubatic incubator, etc. And just something very disturbing there. Erotics and flames and burning bodies, yikes. And this song Fears of Gun, where this title character, Gun, wears his alcoholism well, from bed to sink and back again. And he's busting clock, he hates its face, just sitting and talking to heart and ticks, talking back to clock in slow and studied kicks. The fears of Gun are the fears of everyone. Fingers down the throat of love. Just some of that rhythm and imagery. And just so much of this, albeit angsty, personal griminess, is relatable, you know, for most humans on one level or another, even though here it's, you know, dressed up to the extreme. And the song Deep in the Woods, this is where I think he makes his first salvo into the future narrative storytelling and the faux Southern Gothic type thing. The wood eats the woman and dumps her honey body in the mud. Her dress floats down the well and it assumes the shape of the body of a little girl. Yeah, I recognize that girl. She stumbled in sometime last loneliness, but I could not stand to touch her now, my one and onlyness. Deep in the woods, a funeral is swinging. Worms make their cruel design, saying D-I-E into her skin, saying dead into belly and death into shoulder. Well, last night she kissed me, but then death was upon her. Deep in the woods, a funeral is swinging. And here he also starts to have the sort of feminine revenge embedded in all this misogyny as well. Now the killed waits for the killer, and the trees all nod their heads. They are agreed. This knife feels like a knife, feels like a knife that feels like its feed. Yeah, I recognize that girl. I took her from rags right through to stitches. Oh baby, tonight we sleep in separate ditches. Deep in the woods, a funeral is swinging. Burning the Ice, 1983, has this song Truck Love, which does an interesting thing. I'd say this is the first instance of theophany, religious epiphany embedded in Cave's works. And again, it's he's just talking about truckers. I don't think that's anything near to his heart, and doesn't really come up again. But he's kind of finding his purview. He's talking about this like semi-truck jackknifing and wrecking, jam up on a leaping tree, head on, head first. And God came down and talked to me, and I damn nearly wept. Tears rolling down the dash, tears rolling down the dash. We can't stop the monster rolling. Rise to power, and all this stuff going on. Your eyes stare like bright gold. Eye spot interference all across the fucking road. Burn my eyes, baby. My hand keeps shaking when I'm touching you. They keep shaking when I ain't. And a little ways down, the face of Christ is leaping from the storm. The face of Christ is leaping from the storm. You tend to get religious on these runs. Rise to power, rise to power. And divine power has gone, crawled into this tank. Every metal muscle flexed and pumping at the crank. Pumping at my axis, rendering me sexless. Megatons of muscle kicking dust across Texas. Truck love. The dolls on the grill are caked in bloody bug guts. There are things burning in the desert. There are things burning in the desert. So again, that kind of repetition of themes and images of grime and ecstasy. But what's interesting to me here is that the face of Christ leaping from the storm type imagery almost never comes back. That was his one like big thunderous Christ image. By and large, from here on, he takes the Flannery O'Connor tack of the ragged figure that moves from tree to tree in the back of his mind. That's a line from her first novel, Wise Blood. And he uses the line at least twice in these lyrics. So he's clearly aware of that. And the Christ, Jesus in particular, and maybe the divine more generally, is a ragged figure showing up here and there, punctuating Cave's work all throughout, from these early times to much later, be it Jesus of the Moon and the Stars or whatever it may be. Just there's this constant Christ figure. I mean, it's, like I said, the most Christ-haunted lyrical landscape. But this isn't as much a haunting as a poltergeistic like showing, And then lastly, you have Mutiny from 1983. Jennifer's Veil, I think, again, kind of moving into a bit of the faux Southern Gothic narrative. And then one of my all-time personal favorites from the birthday party days is Mutiny in Heaven. Just the sheer sound of it, the vocal delivery, and the lyrics all come together. And it's pretty simple, I guess, but I do like Nick Cave's Blood and Thunder stuff a lot. And obviously, a whole bunch of this is in the delivery itself. And, you just need to go listen to the songs. That's really what it's about. But sometimes it's good to read out lyrics separately you get, a little something different from that then you can bring back to that listening experience. So, I don't mean to just do a poor rendition of what Nick Cave already does so well. It's just so we can kind of savor some of these things. Well, I jumped and fled this fucking heap on doctored wings, my flailing pinions with splints and rags and crutches, damn things nearly hardly flap, canker upon 1 million tiny punctures that look like long, thin red ribbons draped across the arms of a little mortal girl like a ground plan of hell. Curse these smartened strings, these fucking ruptures. Enough is enough. If this is heaven, I'm bailing out. If this is heaven, I'm bailing out. I can't tolerate this old tin tub so full of trash and rats. Felt one crawl across my soul for a second there. Thought I was back down in the ghetto. Rats in paradise, I'm bailing out. There's a mutiny in heaven. And that's, it's almost like this crescendo of like all the grime and longing for transcendence and denial of it, that's happened in the birthday party so far. And, again, like I said, that the delivery of, if this is heaven, I'm a bailing now, and rats in paradise, just like, oh, it's so good. And it's so relatable. If you've ever had a bad time with religion or any version of heaven, any utopian ideology that you have found oppressive, that you would like to escape from, this is relatable. He goes on, I was born and Lord shaken, even then was dumped into some icy font like some great stinky unclean. From slum church to slum church, I spilt my heart to some fat cunt behind a screen, evil poppin' eye pressed up to the opening. He'd slide shut the little perforated hatch. At night, my body blushed to the whistle of the birch. With a little practice, I soon learnt to use it on myself. Punishment, reward, punishment, reward. And that's another great delivery moment in there. And again, there's, disturbing yikes imagery in there, but from like self-flagellation to drug abuse. Well, I tied on, perched on my bed, I was sticking a needle in my arm and tied off. Fucking wings burst out my back like I was cutting teeth. I took off. Rats in paradise, rats in paradise. There's a mutiny in heaven. And man, I just, that was unexpected when I first heard it. The wings bursting out his back. Just love that. And of course, it's the ecstasy of heroin for Nick Cave, which, if you didn't know, he was using heroin for at least a decade. Oh Lord, I get down on my knees and start to pray, wrapped in my mongrel wings. I nearly freeze in the howling wind and driving rain. All the trash blowing round and round. From slum heaven into town, I take my tiny pain and rolling back my sleeve, rolling and a-rolling. I yank the drip out of my vein. Utopiate! I'm bailing out. Utopiate! If this is heaven, I'm bailing out. Love that phrase, utopiate. My threadbare soul teems with vermin and louse. Thought comes like a plague to the head in God's house. And then all this like faux Latin, like ars infectio forco dio. If you put that in Google Translate, it says the art of infection with a fork. But it seems to leave out the word dio somehow. So maybe that's the right way to translate it, but maybe it's like fork god or something. But like hail hypus dermio vita rex, which is pig Latin or whatever. Just hail king hypodermic needle that is life, Scabio murum per sanctum, dio, dio, dio. Maybe something like I scratched the mouse through the sanctuary. God, God, God. I don't know, man. It's a sort of chaos in these early lyrics that is trying to build to some kind of coherent picture. And I very much enjoy that process. Swampland, just that line, patron saint of the bog. That's Nick Cave for a while. And just let me know if there's other birthday party lyrics you want to discuss, comment, we can talk in the comments, or maybe I could do another video on specific songs or something. But I'm just kind of sampling through and pulling out things that struck me. Anyway, that'll do it for chatting a bit about birthday parties lyrics and how they fit into the scheme of Nick Cave. And next we'll do from about 1984 to 2004 of Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. Thanks again for your support.